You just grab a handful of automation spaghetti, throw it at the fridge, something will stick.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lights Out podcast, the only podcast where we turn the lights off on purpose and then immediately regret it. I'm your host, David Buick, and I'm joined today by the one and only Eric Nekic. Unfortunately, our other co-host is still MIA. Have you heard from Nick lately? He's been gone. This is episode number 2 where he's missing, and I know the listeners are going to be a little bit worried.
Don't worry, he's not on a milk carton anywhere. I spoke to him this morning. He's wrapping 4 Red Ryder BB guns for his children this holiday season. And smartly, he did not purchase a BB gun for his better half. So
I wonder if I can get him to get a 5th for me. It's one of those childhood things that just never happened for me, and I've always wondered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a guy can hope. I mean, maybe he does. I'll see if I can make that little Christmas dream come true for you, David. That said, welcome back. We're going to continue the conversation about ROI with automation, how to select the right system. What are some metrics you should be doing? This might be a shorter episode, but we're really just going to focus on staying in the weeds on the 3 metrics we asked you to bring back.
All right. So as you'll remember from the previous episode, we started a conversation about ROI and really making that ROI calculation before you make the investment so that you know you're making a good investment that will actually help your business and your team perform better, especially as we're working our way into a new year. But really, this is timeless advice for anyone who's looking to adopt technology onto the shop floor. Last episode, we covered establishing the baseline, establishing the current state of your process before you are making that investment so that you can measure your ROI against that initial state and after the technology has been successfully implemented. So hopefully, since the last conversation, you have identified what those bottlenecks are that you want to solve. You've measured your current spindle utilization, your setup time, your average operator load or operators per machine that you're able to run with, and also what your costs are per part, both on the labor and direct machine burden side.
Yeah, David, that's a great point. I hope everybody had a chance to kind of take a look internally and really gather those basic metrics we talked about last week. This will be a shorter episode, but we're really going to focus on using those metrics, how they can be impactful, how to start, using them to your advantage sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think something that Eric and I really want to drive home for folks who feel like this is complicated and they don't have time to figure it out. You don't need an MBA to calculate automation ROI. You just need the right inputs, an honest look at your process, and you can work through this calculation quickly and easily. But it's a worthwhile exercise to take. So just want to encourage everyone to take the time to do it. We're going to break down the math today. Maybe that's why we're going to make it a bit of a shorter episode because the math is easy for this. So there we go. Whether it's a robotic machine tending solution or pallet pool, whatever the case might be, here are some very simple steps you can take to actually perform the calculation. That, Eric, you want to kind of kick us off into what that looks like?
Sure. Let's get into the core formula, right? So The simple version for your ROI percentage is going to be your annual savings minus your gross costs divided by the investment times 100. And obviously that times 100 just takes you to a nominal percentage, right? But so one more time, ROI equals your annual savings minus your annual costs divided by your investment times 100. And that's going to get you your ROI percentage. Pretty basic way to do it. There is an expanded version where you can take labor savings plus your increased machine utilization plus a scrap reduction plus overtime avoided and subtract your maintenance and depreciation, divide that by your capital cost, and that'll also get you your ROI. Any advice on which one they should maybe start with? And, we will be putting these formulas
I was going to say,
in the comments section.
yeah,
So
they
if
need to
you're
go in the show notes.
no need to try to write these down as you're driving down the interstate, please.
It's a very good point. When you say it in a sentence, it probably sounds more complicated than when you're looking at it in the show notes. So we'll make sure that those get in there. There's a simple version and there's the expanded version. And the simple version, I think, is really helpful when you're just trying to do a bit of a proof of concept and just validate an idea that, hey, should we consider this system? We can do some rough napkin math, if you will. And then if you become a little more serious about making that, acquisition of a pallet pool or whatever the case might be, kind of going into the expanded version and being a bit more detailed with your calculation.
Absolutely. I think like the big avoider here is get away from your gut, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know this system's going to be impactful. Well, it's easy to do a simple ROI. And that's kind of the message here, right? Soft savings aren't going to be impactful, right? And then you'll get in that scenario where you've heard the shops that say, we tried that, right? Usually that's preceded by like poor ROI calculation, poor planning, poor integration, right?
Yep. So, I mean, maybe what we could do is just start with a basic ROI. Annual financial benefit minus the annual cost divided by the total investment. And another really easy calculation you could do would be the payback period, which would be the total investment divided by the annual financial savings or the annual financial benefit, if you want to quickly understand that too, because I think it is an important piece of information to understand as well.
Paul, tell me about your trip to Italy.
I went there with the NTMA and we got to tour SMW Autoblok, 2 different facilities. Absolutely blew me away. World class, enormous places. I can't even count how many machines there were, but so much automation. One of the most incredible takeaways for me was the breadth of what they made. I did not know they made so many workholding products and automation products. And I loved watching a big chuck machine a little chuck. So they were machining chucks in huge lathes. I thought that was super fun.
Yeah, you introduced them to me after you came back, and they've been to my shop. And the ideas they have to like breathe new life into some of my machines and the tools and the jobs that we're running was just shocking.
And then one of the coolest things is we're bringing this new automated pallet delivery system, the Hennig workflow, to market. And guess what the interface is? It's SMW 0-point locators. It's really sweet.
We're getting ready to get some of those.
So how do people find SMW Autoblok to look through that massive catalog of products?
It's SMW Autoblok, blok.com.
Yeah, get rid of that C. SMW Autoblok, blok.com.
But let's look at should we work through a really basic example here, Eric, just for the sake of it? Maybe we could talk about a robot parts loader tending a CNC machine, and that frees up a single operator and increases that machine's utilization by about 20%. Is that reasonable for the sake of an example?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So annual labor save. Maybe that operator makes $32 an hour times 2,000 hours in a year. Annually they're making 64 grand. Let's talk about added billing capacity for that machine. So the machine hour rate might be somewhere between $90 and $100 an hour. Let's say $95 an hour, right in the middle of that. And maybe that robot system added 700 spindle hours, that 20%. So that's doing the math, $66,000, 500 of additional billing capacity for that machine. But let's also consider that the process reliability from that automation reduced the scrap cost for that machine by $15,000 annually. The total annual benefit then would be that increased capacity at $66,500 plus the $64,000 that you're saving on the labor cost of that operator, plus the $15,000 of scrap reduction. So your total annual benefit adds up to $145,500. So the total project might cost for a robot parts loader, what do those cost these days, Eric? I mean, just for
you can get into one for 125, 130K.
Okay, sure. I mean, let's be generous. Let's say it's like closer to 200K, 185K, right?
Sure.
Let's just be extreme in our example. That payback period is 15 months, maybe a little over 15 months for a payback period. Year one return on investment equals about 79% following that basic ROI calculation. And that's incredible. Now, this is a generic example, right? So everyone's situation looks different.
Absolutely. But at the end of it, it's all straight to the bottom line.
Right.
That is straight to the bottom line.
And it's not just a labor savings, right? It's a labor savings plus increased capacity plus reduced scrap cost. I mean, arguably, you have to quantify those numbers somehow, and you need to be rolling with that newly integrated piece of automation and measure the performance over time to understand what those numbers are. But as a basic example, hopefully that sheds some light on how easy it is to come up with that payback period and year one ROI.
Absolutely. That is a very easy metric for just about anybody to start getting into, right? And I think you could start with the simple version and move into the expanded version, as part of a future state goal, right? Simple version will get you enough to understand, general payback period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. What about some other key inputs? I think that labor savings is another important one, especially since I think we touched in the last episode. Most people, when they're thinking automation, they're thinking of fixing a labor issue, right? A skills gap issue, something that's usually where the mind goes first. So how can I calculate my labor savings, David?
Right. So really what you want to do is use the remaining labor percentage. So if a robot or a piece of automation is going to reduce an operator's involvement in the process, maybe not entirely, maybe from 100% of the time being there to 40%, you would have a 60% labor savings based on, whatever the cost of that full-time labor is, which is not just their salary, of course, and then multiply that percentage by that fully burdened labor rate for that employee. Maybe that's in the range of $50 an hour by the time you're all said and done with your benefits and all that kind of stuff.
Outstanding. What about the increased utilization, right? I mean, that's another key input if I want to grab my expanded ROI.
Mm-hmm.
What's just a quick way I could start getting a sense of my increased utilization?
Yeah, and I think that, measuring that in terms of a dollar value depends on how you are billing out that machine, right? So what's your burden rate on that machine tool? If you've got a $250,000 mill that runs 50% of the time, arguably every 10% of utilization increase is equal to $25,000 a year in capacity value. But again, depends on kind of what your burden rate is on that machine and how that works into kind of your job costing and your quoting process. But that's an easy one to figure out.
Outstanding. I'll take another, I think, key input here is going to be your reducing setup and changeover time. What's a great way to kind of break that math down? Pallet pools could cut your setup time job to job to job because you can have them staged and scheduled, right? So that setup time could get cut from 2 hours to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you take X hours per month, there's your ROI, right?
It's funny, back when I was running a small job shop, doing a little bit of everything, like our day was like setting up machines. We were doing a lot of low volume work. So it just felt like always setting up and tearing down, set up for an hour and a half, run for 15 minutes, tear down again, move on to the next job. And then connected with another shop owner with a very similar business, similar type of work, similar quantities. And he just had like a single Matsura, I think it was a Matsura, maybe a MAM. And he was like, yeah, I spend my full day setting up also, but then it runs all night until the next morning. And that like broke our brain because like that is Awesome.
Yeah.
So anyways, a bit of a tangent, but that reduced setup when you invest in something like a pallet pool, not necessarily reduced setup, but being able to kind of take the runtime and make that happen when people aren't in the shop is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And just throwing it in there, right? If you look into higher capacity or higher density fixturing, things like that, you can really take this setup, this changeover time, and if I'm using like a 3-sided pyramid or something, I can divide that by 3, and it just continues to snowball in a good way from there. So phenomenal stuff. Walk us through maintenance, programming, and depreciation costs. How important are they? I think people might overlook them, and is that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, maintenance, programming, and depreciation costs, what that really comes down to is you're changing your process. So there's elements of the process that now look different than they did before. As automation increases uptime, it can also add different types of preventative maintenance that you weren't accustomed to doing before. You might have additional consumables, as part of that piece of equipment that you didn't have to worry about before. You might have unexpected repairs or just periodic preventative maintenance that takes that piece of equipment down for half a day, a month. I'm not an expert in these things, so I'm not sure if that's true or not, but those are some examples. So you want to include those types of things when you can get that information, and whoever's working with you on that piece of automation, if it's an equipment reseller or the OEM directly, they should be able to help you with this. So don't be afraid to ask those questions, but you want to include them in the ROI. So try to get the annual maintenance cost in there, labor plus parts plus downtime, right? Don't forget the downtime component that goes with that. On the programming integration, programming is both kind of upfront and ongoing. So I say programming and integration. There's going to be a period of time where you're figuring out how to kind of work that piece of equipment into your workflow. So you're not going to get full utilization out of it. You're not going to get the full benefit for maybe the initial few months. And then there's programming on an ongoing basis of how you want that pallet system to exchange pallets. Maybe you've got some custom end of arm tooling on a robot loader that needs to be figured out and programmed. Maybe you have to calibrate your fixtures or even just produce fixtures from scratch. Maybe there's a simulation or verification process that is involved with how you're programming and setting up that piece of automation to run. So again, not always things that people think about off the top, but definitely will require some time and need to be worked into that calculation if you want a detailed result. And then on the depreciation affects ROI if you want a realistic cost of capital and accounting, from that perspective. So I'm not an expert. Maybe this is where we need Mike Payne from the By the Numbers podcast to come online for a special appearance, because
he'd be a great guest.
You probably have a good answer on this. Big shout out to Mike and his show if you haven't checked it out. But you want to basically understand how that piece of equipment is going to depreciate over the course of, let's say, the first 5 years, and work that into your calculation.
Outstanding.
When you're trying to find equipment financing, Verdant Commercial Capital makes the process easy. With deep experience across 6 industries, including manufacturing, they tailor financing to fit your business, your goals, and your cash flow. Fast decisions, flexible options, and a team that really knows their stuff. When you're ready to grow, upgrade, or innovate, Verdant is the partner to call. Visit verdantcc.com/numbers or search for Verdant Commercial Capital on LinkedIn to learn more.
I want to circle back. You talked about programming a little bit. We know that programming can sometimes be the victim of tribal knowledge, old habits, whatever the case may be. We've seen people, modify entire programs and tool paths around like one difficult part feature or something like that. So if I'm finding that, programming is something that continues to either, I guess, negatively impact my payback period, right, or continue to be a bottleneck. We hear about these adaptive control systems, things like that. Are those sort of tool optimization systems good for, I guess, are they a great remedy here if programming is a bottleneck for me? And do they, to some extent, pull a little bit of focus off of having to calculate my programming dollars into my ROI?
Right. So, I mean, the kind of to step back for a minute, obviously the maintenance and programming and depreciation costs are kind of eating away at your total benefit before you divide it by the investment. So, something like adaptive controls isn't necessarily going to fix a programming bottleneck. There are like AI, programming plugins that can help with that. But what it is going to do is it's going to add some process reliability so that your uptime is going to be increased, your capacity is going to be increased because those adaptive controls are working to reduce the amount of tool breakage and reasons that a program might be interrupted because of a process issue, right? So adaptive feed rate controls, we hear a little bit about those. Those are going to, automatically reduce or increase your feed rate to maintain a consistent tool load. And then once the tool load goes above a set threshold, then it's going to automatically swap out to a sister tool and keep on going. So it's kind of something you can add onto that automation solution to again add a bit of extra process reliability, reduce your consumable tooling costs, and just see a more efficient cycle as a result. So it's kind of like an automation booster, if you will, which is kind of a cool way to look at it.
I appreciate that very, very well laid out answer. How about we shift gears and we walk the folks at home through some example scenarios, kind of bringing some of the metrics we talked about at the end of our last episode and some of the things we're talking about today, just kind of bring them all together and give, I don't know, a few examples of what that might look like in their shop.
Yeah, sounds great. So a few example scenarios that we could talk about. These are just not random, but they're examples to get everyone's wheels turning. Is maybe you would introduce, robotic machine tending on a 2-shift lathe cell as an example, and using the basic ROI formula of annual savings minus annual costs divided by investment. We would see a payback period probably of about 16 months. And to be honest with you, the ROI really depends on so many different factors that it's almost not helpful to just spitball numbers and give you a percentage. I imagine it would be, between 50 and 80%, depending on what, whatever those variables would be. But that's kind of what I've seen in other calculations. Similarly, you might tack a pallet pool onto a 5-axis machine. Now, Eric, I know you've got some expertise in this particular area. I know that Hennig's come out with a really impressive high-density pallet system that specifically bolts onto 5-axis machines. What are you seeing in those cases?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about, premium, a high-end pallet pool, you get what you pay for, right? Or maybe even like if you're looking at an OEM system, I'm going to typically be somewhere between 18 and 24 months as far as that payback period. But it's important to remember that it also now unlocks like lights out, right? I'm running through the night. I'm running on weekends. So I'm kind of with you. It's really situation by situation. Pallet pools tend to be, medium to high mix, lower quantities. So it takes a little bit more of a dance to calculate the ROI. But at the end of the day, yeah, your payback period's usually 18 to 24 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one kind of additional thing to consider when you're thinking through these different scenarios, whether that's a robot loader or a pallet pool, is you might be freeing up a skilled operator, away from a $25 an hour task so that they can go, work on like $50 or $75 an hour tasks, higher dollar value tasks. So remember in your ROI calculation, kind of include that in the net benefit of kind of what you're enabling your team members to go work on, rather than, let's say, just parts changeouts on a machine tool. I think, which is really the exciting part of automation. It's not to replace people; it's to enable them to solve the next problem. And I think that doesn't get said enough. This is not an anti people in my shop having employees, having a team. No, it's freeing them up away from the repetitive work so they can go and solve the next problem.
I love it.
Hey, it's Paul from Making Chips. If you've been burned by recruiters who don't understand manufacturing, you are not alone. That's exactly why we created Hire MFG Leaders. We're not just recruiters, we're current and former shop owners, and we know what it takes to lead in this industry. Whether you're hiring your next operations leader, sales manager, or production supervisor, we'll help you find someone who actually fits. Learn more at makingchips.com/hire.
Hey, one question, and I think it's the folks at home want to know, what about Cobots?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Cobots in the last episode, right? Cobots, there's been a buzz around Cobots ever since they kind of became more mainstream. And I think the answer is it depends on the situation. I've seen them deployed in some high mix, low volume jobs, which has been really successful because they're easily programmed and moved from machine to machine. But again, it really depends on the application. I think most people are better served working with an automation integrator and coming up with the right plan, which might be a cobot, it might be a more mainstream industrial robot, rather than just go and buy something off the internet and then figure it out, which I haven't seen that approach work well for too many people.
No, it's interesting. Previous employer, we did a lot of the automation hardware game, right? We weren't integrators. We didn't sell robots, but we provided some 0-point solutions, a means to pick a fixture up and, repeatedly put it in and out of a machine tool. And what's interesting is of the number of people that tried to take on that kind of DIY mentality, it always became a very long, drawn out process. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, leverage an expert with automation more than a lot of other things. You absolutely get what you pay for. And I feel like any corner you try to cut at the front end of an automation project, you're going to pay for on the back end at some point or another,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Thanks for adding that in. So I think that's about a wrap on what we wanted to cover in today's episode. Again, a bit of a shorter episode, but we wanted this to be really tactical in giving you a bit of a head start on how to actually start to conduct the ROI calculation, what formulas to use. Again, we're going to share those formulas in the show notes.
Yep.
A few action items maybe that we could leave you with before the next episode, which will be the final one in this series. We're going to cover how to measure success after you automate, which is kind of the happy ending to this whole series. Eric, what do we want to leave them with as homework between now and the next episode?
Yeah, great. I think first and foremost, if you haven't done it, just run a quick ROI estimate. I mean, even just getting the simplified ROI, again, like David said, those formulas will be in the show notes, but using your baseline from the first episode in this series, just try to get a sense of that, what that ROI looks like at your facility.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, the next thing would be to calculate your remaining labor percentage for whichever machine or process that you're considering automating.
Yeah, perfect. I think you're going to want to identify your biggest utilization gap, right? Where that automation could extend the uptime of that machine tool. If you can keep the spindle spinning and, good parts are coming out, there is a ton of win just hiding right there for your company.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Awesome. Well, there's your homework until the next episode. You've survived yet another episode of the Lights Out podcast. Feel free to collect your imaginary certificate on the way out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review. Feel free to direct message any one of us on LinkedIn or wherever and give us your feedback, and share the show with whoever needs to hear it. If you have colleagues or industry contacts that are starting to embark on this process of bringing automation into their shop, send our show their way. We love to share this information and help manufacturers thrive with technology. So until next time, thanks for listening to the Lights Out podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you. And if you see Nick, please tell him that we miss him and we want him back.
We're barely holding on without him. All right. Thanks, Eric.
Folks.
Bye.